Well, you're right. This is going to be a great episode because you gave me about 100 different ideas to talk about here. Thinking about, and it's funny because obviously people are on different parts of the business spectrum depending on how evolved their business is, how many members they have on their team. But just real quickly touching on the person you just mentioned who said, hey, you know what? I'm really good at what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and I'm going to start my own business. I always encourage those people, obviously do some market research, but the other thing I encourage them to do is make sure that they have at least 6 months, if not a year's worth of living expenses set aside. Welcome to the Business Brains B.S. podcast, the podcast for people building businesses, battling their own brains, and occasionally stepping in a little BS along the way. So right before we jumped on here, Greg said, hey, I've got a question for you that would be a great topic for the podcast. And I said, don't tell me, Greg, let's just do it on the podcast. So we're going to kind of we're going off script, a little rogue here. This one could be a really good podcast, or you may want to hang up here in a couple of minutes. So what do we got, Greg?
No, it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good one. It's nice and precise. So no, it's
We're rhyming now, are we?
based on thoughts I've had and then conversations I've had with other business owners. And it's basically, there are so many different roles that a business owner plays. So I mean, recently talking to someone who, same profession as me, who's a therapist who wants to, go into their own practice. And I could just tell from the conversation, this person has no idea what they are stepping into. They think they just have to like be a good therapist, and they haven't thought about any expense, like overhead. They haven't, there's so much. And that gets me to thinking about, all the things that go into it, so you got to be good at whatever your profession is. Right. But then you also you got to do marketing, and you got to manage money, and you got to manage people, and just so much. And it's, impossible probably to be really good at all those things. Um, so yeah, so you're the business coach here. So how does a person ever have any hope of successfully operating a business when there's 1,000 different hats you have to wear, 1,000 different skill sets you have to execute?
Yeah. Well, you're right. This is going to be a great episode because you gave me about 100 different ideas to talk about here. Thinking about, and it's funny because obviously people are on different parts of the business spectrum depending on how evolved their business is, how many members they have on their team. But just real quickly touching on the person you just mentioned who said, hey, you know what? I'm really good at what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and I'm going to start my own business. I always encourage those people, obviously do some market research, but the other thing I encourage them to do is make sure that they have at least 6 months, if not a year's worth of living expenses set aside, because, I'm a Pollyanna, very much so. And, we think that it's going to go out and it's going to be easy, and you're going to get smacked in the face a couple of times. And when you're sitting down across from somebody who's a potential client or patient, and you know that you need that business, that comes across, right? People can feel that, and it's a terrible place to be where you're like, I am so desperate for this work that I will throw out the baby with the bathwater in order to get this job, right? Even if I just break even, at least I'll feel like I'm doing something. So I think that's one of the things I would encourage people who are early on to do. I think another thing that business owners need to understand, and it's funny because they told us this in Action Coach training, and it took me a while to get it, is that, Greg, you don't own a counseling business. You own a sales and marketing business that does counseling. Because if you can't figure out your how you're going to get patients in, I keep wanting to call them clients, how you're going to get patients in. I figured you did, yeah. So, I'm sorry, I heard patients when you said that. There you go. Listen to me. I'm so busy talking that I'm not listening. Maybe you could help me with that. Okay, well, good. Now I can use clients interchangeably, so that's good. There you go, folks. A little nugget for you. But yeah, but I really think as you look at a business, the analogy I like to use is it's like baking a cake or cookies, you know, or something like that. If I were to take the flour and the eggs and the frosting and mix it all together and put it in the oven at 90 degrees for 350 minutes or however you bake a cake, right? And then take it out and add the oil and the eggs and stick some candles in there and take them to my wife, say happy birthday honey, she's probably not going to be very happy with that, right? So I had all of the right ingredients. I just didn't put them together in the right order. So I think that's a big part of something that business owners need to understand is you've got to figure out what's that foundation for your business first. And I think a big part of that foundation, excuse me, for the business first is figuring out what do you do, where do you want to go, and who do you want to serve, right? So it's really all about what's your vision, what's your mission, and what's your culture for the business. From there, then I think it's really, really important to make sure that you're using your time intelligently. You know, we've got our 6 steps in the ABOS process. I actually am going to be running a business masterclass on this. It's going to walk through all of these 6 steps here pretty soon. But we've got the mastery component, and mastery is really that foundation for the business, and it's that destination mastery, right? Understanding where are you taking the business? What's the vision? What's the mission, values of the business? It's understanding how you're using your time. And I think this goes a little bit to what you were just talking about as far as wearing all the hats. Um, because so many business owners get so wrapped up in everything that they're not using their time on the right things. They're doing a lot of things that they could be paying somebody else, $20 an hour to do, and they could be focusing on that $400, $500 an hour work that a business owner should do. And I think that's something that you've done a really good job of is identifying the things that you don't need to do and being able to hand those off um, to somebody else. So how let me because I feel like I'm kind of monopolizing things right now. So how did you decide what to hand off to somebody else?
Well, I've done that in different ways for different reasons. Some of them were good ways for good reasons, and some of them were not so smart. Um, so, but as far as how to decide, um, sometimes it's just like this is no longer possible. I mean, I've shared this story on here, but on this podcast before, but the first time I had to make a decision like that was hiring somebody to help answer phones because initially I was the one that answered all the calls and then realizing that we were losing, and I say we because it was me and one other therapist. We were losing potential clients because I just couldn't get to the phone because I'm seeing my people, you know? And so just coming to that realization that like this just doesn't work anymore. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's figuring out, like you said, the best use of your time and money. When I made the decision to pay someone to start helping with billing, there was a I remember the moment I was on the phone with a major insurance company because they had denied one of my claims, and so I called them to try to figure out why they weren't gonna pay me or why they were trying not to pay me, and I wound up sitting on hold for an hour, and then I had another client coming in. And so I was stuck in this decision. Do I stay on hold so I can try to resolve this issue, or do I hang up, lose my place in line, and go see my client? Which, I mean, ultimately, I hung up the phone so I could go see the client, but that it was that situation that made me realize, okay, maybe it would be a better use of my time to pay somebody a little bit to handle these things for me because I can't just, like, miss a whole session just on the outside chance that I might get through to somebody and get this issue resolved, you know? So sometimes it's that, um, and then for me, this has been more like as things have kind of progressed, being able to say, "Okay, what am I not as good at, or what do I not like as much, and what can go to somebody else?" Um, what might somebody do better than me? Um, I just recently one of the therapists that works with us just recently got, I guess you could say, promoted to assistant clinical director just on a part time basis right now, like, helping out with some of the behind the scenes stuff. But I was intentional, like the person I picked is someone who, um, you know, has some traits that are different than mine. And like we can balance each other um, there are things that she would be better at than I would and vice versa. And that was something we talked about before that became official. Um, so sometimes it's that, where do I lack or what do I not enjoy? And then I've also mentioned this on the podcast before. Like I've made the mistake of just what you call abdicating instead of delegating. Just like, well, I don't like this and someone else can do it. So here you take it. And then not paid attention to it and then had problems down the road because I wasn't paying enough attention, and learning that lesson. Um, so it's not a simple process, but I go back. This is hard to do, or at least it has been for me, but it's great advice of, figuring out all those different roles, that like how you talked about just now, the vision, like kind of where is this business going to end up? Where do you want it to end up? You know, you talk about this. It's in the book we've talked about before on here, the E-Myth Revisited. He talks about this, like making that organizational chart as if it's the finished product and putting names in all those boxes, even if your name is in 20 boxes, and then coming up with job descriptions and KPIs for each of those roles. And then as you're adding, you pick, okay, I'm filling this role. So I needed a good person for this right here instead of the desperation move of just like, I just need some help. Any help will do. And I've done it both ways. I can tell you that being intentional works way better.
Much better, yeah. Yeah, well, and, one of the things that I'll do with clients is I'll have them do what we call a skill fund matrix, and it's basically just you've got skill on the bottom, just kinda make an X-axis and a Y-axis, and then fun on the other one, and you break it into 4 quadrants, and then you write down the things that you do as a part of your job or as part of being an owner, and you put them in each of those boxes, right? And then you look at, okay, what are the low skill, low fun things that are showing up in there? And then that's a great place to start looking for opportunities to hand things off, right? And then you can look at the high skill, low fun things. So one of the things I see a lot is business owners not staying up with their books. So you got to have good data in order to make good decisions. And if you're not keeping your QuickBooks or whatever it is you're using up to date to know what your financials look like, it's going to make it really, really hard for you to know, is the business trending in the right direction? A lot of business owners, I got money in the bank account, everything's fine. No, that's not how we run a business, right? So that moves on to that concept of money mastery, making sure that we understand the money that's coming in, how we're collecting it. Are we being paid on time? I see that a lot too. People have cash flow issues, and one of the reasons is because they're working for free because they're letting people, keep pushing the billing out, or they're not following up on accounts receivable. So we need to know how to collect it, how to track it, how to spend it, and how to save it too, right? Because that's a really, really important part of a business, is to finish the end of the year with some money in the account, right? Preferably more money than you started with. And one of the good ways to do that is to make sure that we go on then to delivery mastery. And the delivery mastery is really all about making sure that clients, customers, patients, whatever they are, have a consistent experience, right? So the example I like to use when I'm talking about delivery mastery is really all around, if you went to a restaurant, let's say you got a hamburger, right? And you said, this is the greatest hamburger I've ever had in my life. I cannot wait to bring everybody I know to this restaurant and have them eat this hamburger, right? So you come back the next day, you bring the whole family, and you're like, I'm buying, everybody, you're gonna love this hamburger. They bring the hamburger out, everybody takes a bite of it, and they kind of look at you, and you take a bite of it, and you go, yeah, it's good, but it's not as good as it was yesterday. And then the waiter says, well, we have a different chef in the kitchen today, right? That's a failure on delivery mastery, because the food should be exactly the same. It should look the same. It should taste the same. You should have the same experience every time you go into that restaurant if you've got your delivery mastery knocked down, right? So those are really the 4 components that build that base for your business, right? It's like building a house, and you want to have that strong foundation there. Um,
Did you ever watch that movie, The Founder? Yeah, it makes me think about that when he's losing his mind because all the different McDonald's, are all doing something different. This place is serving mashed potatoes and fried chicken and this, and he's like, "No, burgers, french fries,"
yeah. Which is, and that you're right. So that ties into that delivery mastery. It also ties into a couple of other things. It ties into when you look at, because then when you move from mastery, you move into kind of that marketing component, and part of that marketing component is what makes you unique. And that was really one of the neat things about that movie, is that the McDonald's brothers were able to figure out a way to produce you know quality hot food quickly, right? And you remember the scene where he finds them, and they're standing in line waiting, and they order and it's there type of deal. So that's really a big part of building your brand, and of making sure that you have customers, is figuring out who do you serve and why are they going to love you, right? Kind of that marketing component. But then it moves into the systems component. And that's probably my favorite part of that movie, is when they're showing, when the McDonald's brothers are talking about how they put the system together, and they're out there on the tennis court with the chalk, and they're drawing, this is where the stove is, and this is where we're doing the fries, and people are bouncing off of each other, and they're yelling at them and telling them to leave, and erasing it all and drawing it back out. And that's really what you've got to do with your systems, is test and measure, see what works. And systems are going to help you save time. Systems are going to help you not have to repeat business, right? Have to go back and do things again. And once you've got those good systems in place, then you're able to hire the people to run the systems. So it kind of goes back to what you're talking about with the E-Myth Revisited, is to say, these are all the jobs I do. These are the job descriptions, the KPIs. And I think one of the additional things that you need to look at when you're doing that is, how much is it going to cost me to replace this person, right? So being able to say, all right, the lowest position in this organizational chart is, this technician or whatever it might be. I'm going to go ahead and bring that on, but I got to think about, what is it cost? Was it going to cost me to bring that person on? And while I'm doing that job, I should really be paying myself that wage, because then when I bring that person on, I'm used to that wage being paid, right? So now it kind of gets pushed off, and I'm still pulling the money from being the owner of the business. So I think that's a mistake that a lot of business owners make, is they don't think about, okay, I've got to bring this person on, and that's gonna be that extra pull on the cash. So making sure that you've already got that set aside. Normally, I think the first move that a business owner should make is exactly what you talked about, right? Bringing on some type of an assistant, bringing on somebody to answer the phones, bringing on somebody to return the phone calls. I'm amazed at how many business owners I talk to who talk about, I've got this client who's past due on their bill, and I ask them, well, have you called them? And they said, no, but I've sent them 4 emails. I say, well, just pick up the phone and make a phone call. And I would say 95% of the time, when they pick up the phone and make a phone call, they get paid, within a day or two. So having that person who can stay on top of all those little things that tend to pile up on a business owner's plate, I really do think, for those out there who are in that solopreneur world, that's really the first thing that they should do.
Tell me what you think about this. Something that somebody told me several years ago that I always just kinda run with is, when you're trying to make decisions and figure out how to prioritize, the default needs to be, you always prioritize the stuff that brings in money. Like, because there's a million different things like we talked about that you can focus on. So if I've got 10 things to do today and 2 of them are clearly revenue generators, that's what has to get done today.
Um, I would say, yeah, 99% of the time, yes. If you're going to go to jail because of one of the other ones, then maybe that needs to take priority. But yeah, cash is the lifeblood of a business. So if you're busy messing around with all these other things to build this great business that you want, but you don't have the cash flow to support it, then you're really wasting your time, right? It's it's interesting how often I see business owners who do just that, and they'll focus on the little things instead of focusing on the big picture, right? Because when you've got a healthy cash flow coming into the business, it's amazing how many of the problems that can help solve.
And I'm just thinking, going back to like what makes money when you're the business owner or when you're a manager, sometimes you got to be smart and think about the scale of things. So, like for instance, in the last place I worked, um, I, my job, I was a site director, so I managed a couple of outpatient clinics. But at one point in that role, I was kind of helping out another site director. And they had some, they'd lost a therapist or two, and the site director that was there was had just started seeing all those clients, just and so that's all she was doing. And I remember telling her, no, like your job right now is not to see all the clients. Your job is to hire a therapist. Because if all you do is focus on seeing those clients, for one, you're not gonna have time to find another therapist, and all your other management stuff is gonna start going down the tubes because you won't have time to do that either. So this is a very short-lived solution. Like, you're gonna start having problems. You gotta hire the therapist who can see these clients. Um, so thinking about, like, I could see a person saying, "Well, if the priority is what brings in money, let's see these clients because that's billing and that brings in money." And yes, but that's a short-term vision. The long term, what's gonna generate the revenue is getting the person who can do that all day, every day.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to, bringing in somebody to take the little things off of your plate so you can continue to grow the business to a point where now you can bring on more revenue producers, exactly like you did, right? You had another therapist, then you brought somebody in to handle the phones, increase the number of clients you were able to see because you were able to get back to them, able to get them scheduled, able to have somebody follow up on the billing, all of those different things so you could focus on those revenue generating activities. And then ultimately it started to grow and grow and grow, and you recognize, okay, we're getting to capacity with all of our therapists. Now it's time to bring another therapist on, and slowly that all builds upon itself to a point where you are now able to benefit from all of those other revenue producers, right? But it all goes back to that, um, low skill, low fun, low pay, and then the high skill, low fun, maybe higher pay. What are the things I need to get off of my plate so I can focus on the things that are going to make the business better, going to make the business money, hiring the right people, right? I think that's another thing that people don't think about too. Is I heard a great quote the other day. We've all heard measure what matters, but I'm sorry, inspect what you expect. So it was inspect what you expect and pay for what you get. And I think so often what we do as business owners is we say, okay, here you go, this is the expectation, but then we never really follow up on it. And we have people who are not living up to the expectations, and we're paying them like they are. And then we have people who are going above and beyond the expectations, and we're paying them like they're just living up to the expectations. So really getting involved in there and staying on top of those expectations and holding people accountable to them makes a huge difference as well. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Business Brains and BS podcast. Remember, progress beats perfection. Hope is not a strategy, but it is a necessity. And the BS that tends to hold us back usually starts in our own heads. So if you enjoyed this episode, follow the show on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating, and make sure you share it with a business owner who you think needs to hear it. Until next time, we'll see you.